Remote Desktop Web Connection. Like the Remote Desktop Client we've already discussed, Windows 2000 includes a Remote Desktop Web Connection option to facilitate remote desktop connections using Internet Explorer. So we'll start by installing the Remote Desktop Web Connection. So the first thing we'll do is we'll click on Start, Control Panel, Add or Remove Programs, and then we'll come over here and we'll choose Add Remove Windows Components. Now, as the Remote Desktop Web Connection is part of IIS, we'll double click on Application Server, and then we'll place a check in IIS, and we'll double click on IIS, and we'll scroll down, we'll double click on the World Wide Web Service, and then we'll choose Remote Desktop Web Connection. Then we'll click OK, OK, OK one more time, and then we'll click Next. Now make sure that you do have your Windows 2003 CD-ROM in your drive, because it will require some files to be copied to your server. So in the meantime, I'll pause this video and we'll return once the files have been copied to our server. Okay, the files have been copied to our server, so we'll click on Finish. And one of the great features of Windows 2003, we don't even have to reboot our server. Now, performing these steps using Add Remove Programs installed the Remote Desktop ActiveX control, which is needed to embed a working copy of the remote desktop into a web page, and it also installed a sample web page in our system root /web/tsweb directory. So if we go over to our Windows directory, and we'll scroll down, and we see a web directory. Now in here we also see a tsweb directory, and we have a default page here. Now it also went and shared this default page on our server for IIS. So in our example, our server name is server01. So the URL to our Remote Desktop Web Connection by default is located at http server01/tsweb. Now you can use the IIS Manager to change this location later if you wish, but for now I'm simply going to click on Internet Explorer, and then I'll go and browse to that URL. Now by default, the Internet Explorer Enhanced Security configuration is going to block our request, but I know it's safe, so I'm going to click on Add to add server01 to our trusted zone, and then our page will load. Now we see the Remote Desktop Web Connection login page, and you can see we've been given a security warning by default for the Remote Desktop ActiveX control certificate. So we'll click Yes on the security certificate to allow us to run the ActiveX control. Now we need to type in the name of the server that we wish to connect to. So in our case, this will be server01. Next we can choose our display size, and we can see that it defaults to full screen. But if we check the drop down box, we've got a few other options of 640 by 480 all the way up to 1600 by 1200. And I'll just leave this default here at full screen. Now here we can also send our logon information for this connection. Now this just enables us to pre-populate the logon information by entering in our username and domain name, but we won't do that, so we'll leave that unchecked and we'll hit connect. Okay, and there you can see our full screen connection. Now even though this doesn't look like it, it is actually running from a web connection, so if we go over here and click our window connection, you'll see behind here that it is pulling the page from server01/tsweb, and it's pulling out the default HTML page, and you can certainly see here that it is inside a web browser. And down here we just get a message telling us that we're connected to server01. Okay, well I'll hit cancel on this, and this time what I'll do, I'll type in server01 again, and we'll make it a little smaller so we can see it a bit better. We'll click on connect, and there you go, you can certainly see that we are connected to our remote server via a web page. So I'm just going to punch in our administrator details here and our password. I'll spell administrator correctly as well. Okay, and here you can see us logged into our remote server via a web page, and you can certainly do everything you would do as if you were sitting at the console. Now this web connection of course relies heavily on Internet Information Services running on your web server. So if you do have problems connecting to the Remote Desktop Web Server, use the IIS MMC to resolve any IIS issues. So there you have the Remote Desktop Web Connection. It works in exactly the same way as the Remote Desktop Client, except now we can connect from a web browser.